I'm not sure what's going on in Britain. Or let me say this, I don't know what's going on in London, because London is no longer an English city, and that's how they got the Olympics. I mean, they said we're the most cosmopolitan city on earth, but it doesn't feel English. I had a Californian friend come over 2 months ago, walk down the King's Road and said to me, well, where are all the English people? And I mean, I love having different cultures around, but when the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
Most people, I would even be willing to say the vast majority of people, understand and recognize that government, especially at the federal level, is totally corrupt.
This week, BBC London is looking at the changing face of London and what it means for the capital. Figures compiled for the programme suggest that in the next 20 years, the ethnic diversity of this city will change dramatically.
For the first time ever, the number of people who class themselves as white British is now a minority in London.
People who identify as white British citizens are now a minority in their capital cities.
White folks are on track to becoming, and I hate to say this, the minority in America.
A new report out by the government shows that by the year 2042, white Americans will no longer represent the majority of the population. That prediction is 8 years sooner than previously expected.
That the native French population would be finding itself in a rapidly decreasing minority.
Her kan etnisk norske være i mindretall om 20 år i 2030.
Children from white families in Birmingham are set to become a minority group for the first time when this year's census is collected in March.
The latest census suggests white British born are now in a minority.
Census Bureau says whites will be a minority.
Californians know a thing or two about demographic change. 70% of all state school pupils in Los Angeles are Hispanic.
For the first time in American history, non-whites will make up half or more of the next generation, according to a new study by the Pew Research Center.
The latest census suggests that white Brits are now in a minority in London.
And the fact that we are going to become a minority in our own country before 2050, well before 2050 for the younger people.
When the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
And we British are being turned into strangers in our own land, and we were never asked whether we even wanted it.
About immigration within the United Kingdom, what are your feelings upon that?
Well, I think it's always been a very open policy, which I think is very admirable of you. But I think at some point there had to be limits to that. But Americans shouldn't be advising on what those limits are. But at some point, I think you do have to limit that immigration because it's a small island, and ultimately,
because I think you're losing your own culture.
Madam, immigration, a good or bad thing? I don't know what to say about that. I don't think it's a good thing.
Isn't it strange how, for some reason, all white countries and only white countries have this forced mass immigration from the third world? There has been no vote about this at all. I often hear it said that people should have the right to live wherever they want. But if they think people should live wherever they want, then why do we have forced integration? When the government forces integration of non-whites into white neighborhoods, we see the phenomenon of white flight.
And I know a good many people who have moved, and I'm still in touch with them.
And they're white?
Oh yes, they're all, white British, yes.
I want to live cheek by jowl with them and slowly but surely find that I'm the only person left in an area where everybody else has moved away from, and that's what's going on.
All the traditional communities are outnumbered completely by newcomers, and the newcomers keep on and on rolling in. It has a very alienating effect.
When white people live together in their own communities, those communities are then deemed too white. Millions of dollars are spent to make sure that these areas become more diverse. If everyone had freedom of association, then how could an area be too white? This seems like a huge contradiction. To say, yes, people have the right to live wherever they want, but why do we have forced integration?
Uncle Sam wants to help you diversify your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. Tonight, correspondent Doug McElway tells us about a new interactive effort that some people say is a huge overreach.
It's called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. It will require the feds to gather data on segregation in every single American neighborhood and remedy it. In every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
Whether you like it or not.
When white people move to new neighborhoods, we see the process start again. The government forces integration
in every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
And whites flee.
First, they import millions and millions and gazillions of non-whites into otherwise all-white living spaces without a vote. Without a discussion. Any discussion is met with what? Well, it's met with psychological, you're racist, you're Nazi. You know, only whites can be racist. All whites are racist forever. So on and so forth. And then, of course, they force integrate, they force assimilate. And while they're doing that, they basically, everything's multiracial, multicultural, multiracial, interracial relationships. They do this in white countries and only white countries, and they tell us about our inevitable brown futures.
It's important to remember that our country is stronger because of our diversity.
We strive to bring the benefits of diversity to our students, to our school, to higher education, to the state of Texas, and to the nation as a whole.
Now, diversity.
So it's really important that if we get a more diverse profile of councillors at community and so it's really important.
There can be no ethnically pure state in Europe. We have a whole program of diversity which was aimed entirely at chasing down white people. So we have white flight, assimilation, that diversity means that all whites must be chased down. All whites must be chased down, which is what the word diversity means. Well, diversity means that whites can't escape. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say in the article, white flight is declared as racism.
Yeah. It is considered, it is what diversity is meant to reverse. Chase down. Those two words are critical. Chase down white people. That explains the situation.
Uncle Sam wants to help you diversify your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not.
So it's really important.
All whites must be chased down, which is what the word diversity means.
going to be totally different. Most of the population will be non-white, maybe in 25 years.
Well, yeah, and it's not like we were discussing out in the office today. It's not just about immigration. It's also about intermarrying and all of these different phenomenons that are going on in society.
In every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
Wesley Clark, as the head of NATO, standing in Europe, said, you know, there's no room for ethnically pure states in Europe. He's not talking to Arabs, he's not talking to Turks, he's not talking to Chinese or Africans or Mexicans. He's talking to basically white children in Europe.
So they have to be forced by the government to bring in the third world into all white living spaces.
Chase down white people.
Diversity means chasing down every last white person.
It is what diversity is meant. Chase down. Those two words.
And on top of this actual phenomenon that we can all witness, we have the propaganda.
Every ad I see now has some kind of mixed couple of some sort. I see this being pushed everywhere. White men are made to look nerdy and stupid. They can't dance and they're so boring. But the non-white men are made to look strong, masculine, and heroic. It is no longer a good thing to have white children. They are considered boring and undiverse.
Not only do you have propaganda, which is massively anti-white, we have weaponized words. Anyone that talks about any of these topics is always called one particular word. And can you guess what that word is?
The R word.
Racist. Anytime you have propaganda and weaponized words, especially words that are supposed to set off triggers to shut you down, to keep you shut up, and we have phenomenon, we're no longer in the realm of propaganda. If you have propaganda backed up by phenomenon, we're now into warfare, psychological warfare.
Yep.
And psychological warfare is always reduced down to, you know, you're either with us or against us. You have to have something to say when people are calling you a name, especially in a mean, malicious way. And the word racist is used as a weapon all over Western civilization. It's used to stigmatize. It's used basically to silence any opposition. And what you want to do is not be silent. So when someone calls you a racist, you just say, you're just saying it because I'm white. Anti-racism is a code word for anti-white. So when called a racist, you want to respond accordingly. You're just saying it because I'm white. Anti-racism is just a code word for anti-white. Racism only applies to white people's homes, white people's churches, white countries. It doesn't apply to anyone else. They're not trying to yell racism anywhere else. Racism is an anti-white hate slur, is really what it is. And the phenomenon in Western civilization is massive amounts of immigration. You can't debate it. You can't even talk about it, or you're a Nazi. We've all heard the words before. So we have forced immigration, forced integration, forced assimilation, and then they tell us about our inevitable brown future. They're doing this in white countries and only white countries. You know, China's still going to be Chinese 50 years from now. Africa's still going to be Africa. Saudi Arabia is still going to be full of Arabs, but we're all supposed to be blended.
Quel est l'objectif? Ça va faire parler, mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle. Ce n'est pas un choix, c'est une obligation, c'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement, au risque de nous trouver confrontés à des problèmes considérables. Nous devons changer, alors nous allons changer.
They would like us to believe that this is all accidental. Oh yeah. This is all, I mean, this isn't happening in a vacuum, by the way. Nicolas Sarkozy, now he was the head of France. He's the big deal in France. This guy's top of the league in France. Talking about forcing miscegenation. It's targeted towards children. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. And you can listen to exactly what he's saying.
Mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle.
He's saying that the current rates of intermixing, miscegenation, there's a translation, are too low. They're going to have to do something to force it.
Ce n'est pas un choix. C'est une obligation. C'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement.
There's more than a few human rights violations in that speech, and this goes to the heart of the plan. If you look at the anti-white proposition, there can be no all-white countries anywhere, and there can be no all-white areas in the formerly all-white countries. This is the anti-white proposition. It doesn't matter if you go to France, it doesn't matter if you go to Germany, it doesn't matter if you go to America. You know, you've got all these countries trying to make themselves non-white without a debate. Well, actually, any debate is met with the what? You're a racist, you're a neo-Nazi, you know, you're a white supremacist. It's always the same thing. And this is happening, of course, in every white country, all white countries. No one's exempt from this stuff. And of course, it just doesn't happen that way. That doesn't accidentally occur. Psychological warfare means war. It means there's planning. It doesn't happen by accident. You can't have something like that without a plan. There has to be an agenda. You're not going to accidentally try to make China non-Chinese.
So let's break this down again. You have forced mass non-white immigration into white countries and only white countries. Upon this, we have the government forcing integration to all white living spaces within the country. And then they promote miscegenation all day and all night while demonizing everything that is traditional or white. It's genocide.
You can't have something like that without a plan. There has to be an agenda. You're not going to accidentally try to make China non-Chinese.
When the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
It's genocide. Yep. It's one of the largest psychological operation schemes in the history. It'll be studied for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's the largest psychological operation scheme ever. You know, the largest phenomenon of immigration, forced integration, forced assimilation, and the inevitable brown future for white countries and only white countries, matched with, you know, the phenomenon of the open borders and everything else, matched with massive anti-white propaganda, programming and propaganda. And the two together combine to make an operations. Operation is phenomenon backed by propaganda. I mean, it's something we can readily observe.
And the task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
They're silly, and it's a genocidal scam. You know, most people watching this is going to include, well, this diversity stuff is just a genocidal scam.
The anti-white narrative and just the outright hostility towards whites in America and really all across the world is just so blatantly in your face.
They keep saying that this is to meet some kind of diversity quota, but I don't see them enforcing this diversity agenda in, say, Japan or Africa.
It was a black immigrant came in and said, "It's too white here." And
yeah, well, imagine if you were to go into China and say, you know, it's too Chinese.
Well, of course.
It seems to be like diversity just means less white people.
I know we're going to get people writing in saying that genocide is typically a violent crime. No, it's not. If you look at the 1948 Act,
the UN definition of genocide is A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group.
And deliberately inflicting on that group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, go to any city centre which is inundated with the third world. You will not see any white people in Tower Hamlets. You won't see white people in all parts of Luton, parts of Leicester, all across the country, because they have been driven out. They have lost their right to exist as a culture and a race in their own country.
The peoples of Britain and Europe have lost their place in the world. I think it is right for people to have a place they call home, an identity that they're proud of. I think it for all people around the world, and I think it for the people of this country. And I hope tonight you can vote to say you think that too. Thank you.
immigration a good or bad thing?
Immigration?
Immigration.
Bad.